If you're on Facebook, now you can follow Notebook on Cities and Culture on its official Facebook page. Take a look at facebook.com/Notebook on Cities and Culture. Season 3 of Notebook on Cities and Culture is brought to you by Carl Haley and Daniel Murphy. Since we're sitting here in Nara, Japan, I can't help but ask you the most relevant question that comes to my mind is what you thought of Guy Maddin's film My Winnipeg.
Oh, that's a tough one. Well, being a Winnipegger, born and bred, I watched My Winnipeg with a bunch of Winnipeggers in my living room in Vancouver. So,
these were all essentially Winnipeg expats then.
Yes, Winnipeg expats. We got a good kick out of it. We kind of knew Guy Maddin's kind of quirky sensibilities. So the fact that he could, it almost struck me a little bit. It was kind of like bullshitting a bit or creating this mythology about Winnipeg, but mixed in with the real stuff.
Right.
And there's something about that I like. I think Winnipeggers really like to mythologize the cold winters and kind of like the darkness there. You know, I always tell people here are amazed when I say, oh yeah, it's minus 35 in the winter. And if my old music school teacher, apparently he slipped and fell taking out the garbage and he died. You know, it's almost like there's wolves and coyotes roaming the streets. You know, so it's easy to mythologize such extreme climate. So, but a lot of we all shed a tear when he got to the hockey part when they showed the dynamiting of the Winnipeg Arena.
Yes.
So
as you would. Mm-hmm. It is Notebook on Cities and Culture. I'm Colin Marshall, sitting here right next to Tōdai-ji Temple in Nara, Japan, with Christopher Olson, who began in Winnipeg, went on to Vancouver, and as a writer, as a critic, as an artist, has now found his way to Nara, where we're surrounded by children and deer. And we're near a giant Buddha. We're near a giant torii gate. We're certainly in Japan, aren't we?
Yes, we are. Yeah, the beautiful.
Totally Japan.
It's ridiculously Japan. It's cartoon Japan. It was either that or we conduct the interview in Dotonbori under like the big blinking Glico man.
Yes,
in
it's
Osaka.
gotta be the Glico man.
But I figured this is a bit quieter and nicer, and also a little more oxygen.
Yes.
So,
speaking of films that provide a perspective on a place, and a very distinctive one, we talked about Guy Maddin, My Winnipeg, but what is the importance, and I think it's important to me, and it'll have been important to listeners as well, I think, certain Japanophile or even Francophile, cinephile listeners. Chris Marker's Sans Soleil. What's that movie to you?
Sans Soleil. Well, geez, I have it in my phone.
The whole movie is right there. You can watch that at any moment.
Oh, yeah. I love Sans Soleil. It was a brilliant film, but I had seen it when I had already been to Japan once. We were discussing it earlier. What was I saying? I think it's Sans Soleil. I think he describes the movie to me is less about Japan and more about travel, and that dreamy sense of disconnectedness.
Could we say about displacement?
Discombobulation,
yes.
Especially in terms of things like seeing things for the first time, experiencing other cultures. Confronting the other, whether the small O or the big O other, which means also confronting yourself and your relationship to that. How do you read the other? How you deal with that. And also you throw jet lag into the mix. Sans Soleil always makes me think of jet lag for some reason.
You saw Sans Soleil for the first time after being in Japan for the first time. So what stuck out to you in the film as particularly Japan resonant? Like, oh, he's got it. That is Japan.
That's really difficult because the thing is, so much of Sans Soleil is Tokyo-centric. He does spend some time in Nara. There is that montage, the TV montage, but I'm kind of at a loss. I think one of my favorite scenes actually was, and it was the funniest part in the movie, is the gentleman cooking, I think it was teppanyaki or okonomiyaki, and talking about Mr. Yamada and the art of action cooking.
Yes.
And it's so funny because one person could watch it and go, really? Because, by doing action cooking, he's, he's well versed in the fundamentals of art, poetry, and philosophy, even local politics. And just like, dude, you're totally bullshitting right now. This is great. So you're having one on us. So
I would imagine, given that you come from Canada, given that you went to a French immersion high school, you are francophone yourself, as Chris Marker was being French. What is there a sense in which that film is also resonant on a French cultural level as well as a Japanese one?
I don't know. I don't really bring the Chris Marker's association with like the new wave and French cinema. I mean, I guess that plays a part in it in terms of style, playing fast and loose with the camera. I never really make that connection. I don't know.
It's a completely separate. It's a sort of an orthogonal element to it all. The fact that Chris Marker comes from France.
I think so. I mean, I think the only thing in terms of like French cinema is you look at the craft of involved in making that film, and I think that's what keeps bringing me back to Soleil is the montage of word and image, and I think no one edits as dreamily or as exquisitely or as tightly as Marker did, in that it follows its own sort of internal logic, that images not connected with what the narrator is saying seem to work perfectly fine.
Right.
Two airplanes refueling and then cutting to the Awa Odori festival works somehow.
Yes, there's no possible objection to any of the juxtapositions there, you might say, though there's also really no possible explanation as well, There's
so much room for it to go wrong. I mean, I think there's a lot of people, who've probably, I've got tons of video footage. It's like I could try and make my own version of Soleil, and it would just be horrible.
Right.
It would just be so wrong. It would look amateurish and clunky, and yeah, it wouldn't work. I think, Chris Marker was a particular filmmaker who was just, I think we were discussing this earlier. It's almost like he was at the top of his craft, or he did two masterpieces, not once but twice. First with La Jetée, and then secondly with Soleil. Two very radically different films.
Is there also a sense in which the works of art that are most important to you, that remain with you the most, that resonate with you the most, are the ones where there are a million ways they could go wrong, the ones that are on some sort of high wire in that sense? I don't know if that's the right metaphor, but there's so many ways Chris Marker could have also done La Jetée wrong. I mean, a film of photos that's about time travel. I mean, most time travel movies are done wrong.
Absolutely. Soleil could have been done really wrong. It could have, in terms of art that walks on the high wire, I think that tension, that's what makes a lot of pieces work. Whether it's, I'm sure Rothko probably botched a bunch of them.
Yes. Those aren't the ones we're seeing.
Those aren't the ones we're seeing. Especially if you get into like lowercase sound and like contemporary improvised music, it's all about the high wire. When you have like two trumpeters and a percussionist making just the tiniest of sounds, and spending more time listening to each other rather than playing. The coming in at the wrong moment can just completely disrupt the structure. It's like building a house of cards. So that tension within artwork is something I'm always looking for.
That fact that you describe them listening more than they're playing. It seems like in a film like Soleil, you have a filmmaker who's seemingly spending more time absorbing than literally making. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and I think a big part of that is that it was shot, I think, on, I don't know all the gear, but it was like just shot on 16 millimeter, like no sync sounds.
Right. He had like a micro cassette recorder that he used later.
I know, and there's something about that that I think that's part of what makes the film succeed. Right. In that if he was shooting digitally or had like a decent pro rig, I think the movie would definitely not have turned out very well. I think it would have just automatically, by virtue of the gear he was using, adhere to certain structures and certain formalities of filmmaking. So if you're working just with no sound and just a camera that's silent, you are just absorbing images. You can spend more time composing and working with the images. I think that plays a key role in the same way that, say, I just read a stat recently that I think there were more photographs taken in 2011 than there have ever been shot in the history of the world. Another photographer once said, there are more photographs in the world than there are bricks. And that's before digital came along.
Yes, oh my God.
And so if you think of like where image making is at now compared to, say, an artist like, let's say, Stephen Shore, or someone who works with, 4x5, 8x10 large format camera work, the gear you work will determine the outcome of what you're doing.
There's something that you probably heard a million times in art school, but I've never been to art school, so the idea for me remains fascinating and almost novel whenever I think about it, but that limitations, whether self-imposed or technologically or socially imposed, limitations are an engine of art, one of the ones you need the most.
Oh, absolutely. I think working with restrictions is one of the best things you can do. I think that's one of the problems if you work digitally. Using Photoshop, for instance, just to do basic color correction and stuff like that. I graduated with a BFA in photo from Emily Carr. Just Photoshop itself requires so much discipline. There's there's one thing about digital and Photoshop is there's a million ways to fuck up an image now. When you're shooting with film or even a 4x5 camera and stuff, you are much more responsible for how the image is going to turn out. And there's something fun about that. Just as much as there's just as much fun to shoot using Instagram.
And the many post-Facebook tools now. I think of all you mentioned those, the amount of photos taken last year being more than the photos that were ever taken before that. Especially relevant to think about that here in Japan, where I hear people describe Japan as a country that makes you think in images, or they'll describe Japanese people as thinking better in images. Or I was hanging out with some friends, some Japanese friends the other day, and every time food was set in front of us, all three of them quick draw style whipped out their cameras to photograph the food, and I'm thinking they really are better at taking photos. It didn't even occur to me to take a photo. It's how much is this a land of images? And interpret that however you like, by the way.
Okay, yeah, that is a tough call. I don't know. It's very hard. I think. See, having a microphone pointed at you, it's like all of a sudden, that Lacanian other now is like, I'm looking right at it.
Yeah, see, this is the kind of thing people want to hear, though. They want to hear behind the curtain.
I know. It's like having a microphone pointed at you. It's like all of a sudden there's like this chorus of all of my peers and stuff. Oh shit! Everything I'm saying is on the record.
Right. Yeah. So I should probably ask a less abstract version of that. I mean, there is I find myself thinking more about images here in Japan than I do back in the States. And maybe it is because my friends in Japan take a lot of photos of their food. Maybe it's simply that. Maybe it's the idea that the Japanese tourist is always photographing, and should I be doing that? Maybe it's the idea that visual art tends to be... there's more visual art than other forms of art sometimes here. What do you think?
I think a large part of it is, let's say, people are documenting their food because a lot of care goes into the presentation of it. There is a big thing I found in Japan, and it's very hard to even make that transition if you're a foreigner in the Japanese workplace. Even working at Neikaiwa, which is just a kind of McJob sort of English school, is that there is this, for lack of a better term, from the Westerner's perspective, this kind of essential uptightness in Japan that is also this discipline and this attention to detail. So, for instance, when if you're having teishoku dinner, with all of the small dishes set in front of you, everything is done with aesthetic intent. There is this long history of craftsmanship and just doing things properly.
Right.
And you see evidence of it every day.
We have less of it in the States and Canada, unfortunately.
I think so, yeah. And I think it's just a matter of course here,
Right.
you know, and just the sense of like having to do things properly all the time. There is a very, very refined aesthetic sense here, so much so that I kind of forget about it sometimes. Right. And it isn't until, let's say, you know, my wife and I, we go out for dinner at, for instance, a great place in Naramachi called Kondo Tofu. It's a set meal, seven small courses, all tofu related. And every small dish is a work of art. You have to take pictures of it.
You can't resist. This needs to be preserved.
Absolutely. I mean, the craftsmanship that is embedded in so much of Japanese culture. For instance, you know, Tōdai-ji temple just over there. A lot of the pillars, they don't use nails.
Right.
Everything is, you know, like, you know, Japanese carpentry is an amazing art form where everything is about like, you know, tension and stress and things fitting together in a modular way. While also, you know, Tokyo Skytree, they took, in order to be more earthquake resistant, they looked at old pagodas and how they've managed to stay standing for a couple thousand years, or 1,500 years, however long. And they took cues from that. So the sense of craftsmanship here is quite something. I marvel at it and kind of forget about it every day, constantly reminded.
It almost makes us look back to our North American homelands and think, man, we come from very utilitarian, quick and dirty traditions, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's when we were looking at Tōdai-ji earlier, or even looking at the temple guardian statues on either side. It's like you think of those and go, oh, geez, okay, so Canada celebrated its centennial in 1967. It's a very young country. Well, like, you know, the white guys' history before, you know, the white guy showed up and ruined it for everybody else. But the Canada that I grew up in, that I'm a part of, you know, like the statues guarding the temple that is older than the country I grew up in. So there's a lot more time spent on refining certain sensibilities, on getting it right, or doing things properly. Momus, you know, spoke about that with, you know, he calls it superlegitimacy. People really take their jobs very seriously here, and I respect that. And coming here as, you know, an individualistic sort of rebellious, you know, Westerner who lived in Vancouver, who also kind of got tired of that kind of individualism. It's quite a marvel to behold, right down to the person at the convenience store.
Right. You mentioned Momus, who's been a guest twice on the previous version of the show, and we're both readers of his and listeners to his music. And superlegitimacy is a concept I've been thinking about while I'm here. I mean, how could you not? He defined this quite a few years ago after he saw, I believe, a train driver, you know, white-gloved and doing this very precise set of motions, almost performing his job as if he were on stage, as if he were in, say, kabuki or even no theater, with that level of precision and engagement and formalism. Yes. I mean, that's the word to use is formality, formalism. And Momus says in the West we would see a train driver or a convenience store clerk and say, oh, well, that's just a guy who's maybe, let's hope this is a temporary thing for him, or or he plays in a band or something.
He's on his way to being a rock star or the president or an artist or blah, blah, blah. There's something else that they're going for.
Well, let's hope he has a good hobby, at least.
Yeah, you know, in Canada, you see the guy at the convenience store and just go, well, how much are you making an hour? You see the bus driver and, you know, you go, man, I hope that's union. You got to put up with a lot of shit if you're a bus driver in North America.
Exactly. There's a lot of public service jobs. You're like, I hope you're corrupt. I hope you're on the take or something, because this can't be satisfying.
And the medical and dental must be good on that gig. Maybe I should give up this art thing and learn how to drive a bus.
Right. You see, there's that way of thinking about it. You know, but I wonder, when Momus writes about the super legitimacy of a train driver in Japan, or of a convenience store clerk in Japan, or of anybody really in any position, the ones we would say, yeah, they're passing through on their way to higher things. It is hard to reconcile those in my mind, because, I mean, geez, I would be hoping to go on to bigger things if I were working at a convenience store. You know what I mean? And I don't want to look at the Japanese people and say, oh, they're Japanese. That means they're satisfied with that.
Oh, absolutely. That's part of the beauty of living in Japan and being a Westerner and interpreting and reading all of this stuff and having to kind of figure that stuff out for yourself. Luckily, and at least like with Masayo, my wife, I can bounce these ideas off of her and get some insight, you know. But there's a lot of that living in Japan. There's a lot of baggage as like a white guy who at least took one intro to post-colonial theory and discourse class, and read that one chapter from Orientalism, and you bring that with you to your experience of Japan. So, but I think the thing about superlegitimacy is there's a sense, and it's kind of my wife kind of explained that sense of chanto shite kudasai, do it properly. Do it properly or not at all is drilled into you at a very early age. Right. I mean, we didn't have to learn kanji. We just learned ABCs and cursive script. Yes. Here you have to learn, hiragana, and then for all the loan words, katakana. And if you do you practice Japanese writing at all? I
do. I mean, I'm struggling to keep the kanji in my head, but I'm far from the 2000. I need to read a paper, but we're getting there. I'm a year in and I don't have my hiragana memorized yet. I don't have it perfected. So then you throw kanji into the mix. I think that's one of the reasons why I think Japan is a visual culture. For instance, the character for tree, you write that 3 times, you have mori, which is forest. So I think kanji in particular in the writing is so exacting that I think that plays a part in it. The crafts, all of the prescribed movements, whether it's let's say gagaku musicians or tea ceremony. Masayo's sister has her certificate and she can do tea ceremony, and ikebana, and so many aspects of Japanese culture and is about aesthetics. And just doing it properly. Don't be sloppy. Yeah, I can admire it, certainly.
And you will see that in the train drivers, for instance. Because I can guarantee you that train drivers, were probably like densha otaku. They were train nerds when they were kids, they wanted to be train drivers for as long as they wanted to.
It is a dream job.
Yeah, and you work really hard to get there. So when you're surrounded by so much of that ethic of, things being kind of stern but still beautiful and aesthetically pleasing, and that sense of being surrounded by things being done properly all the time. And I'm sure the older generation says it's going to hell in the handbasket.
As every older generation everywhere says.
Oh, absolutely, but that's, I think, a huge part about living in Japan. And it takes a while to get used to. I mean, it's hard to say. I've lived here for a year now, and this is like, there's so many different Japans. There's the Japan you see from outside. Whether that's why I think Sans Soleil, for instance, is hard for me to discuss now, because Sans Soleil is about a visitor. It's about visiting. It's not living day to day, taking the train to work and, going grocery shopping and, all of that stuff.
Chris Marker in no way prepared you for life in Japan, then?
No, that just kind of came, that comes with the territory.
Right.
So, I've completely lost it. Where were we going?
Let me ask you this. When did you realize that actual life in Japan was a viable proposition for you?
That was probably my first visit in 2008. I'd been here 3 times before I had decided to make the big move, and I met an absolutely wonderful lady back in Vancouver in 2003, and and we dated and lived together for a bit, and then did the long distance relationship thing, and thank heavens for things like Skype and seat sales and freaking flyer points. So
How low could you get a price down for a flight here to Japan from Vancouver?
I'm not sure, because luckily she knew a really good travel agent here, so she would always book them. So I tried looking around in Vancouver. I could never get like a decent deal, but here we were long distance for 4 years, 5 years, but we were seeing each other 3 times a year. and then talking to each other every day via Skype. Now, I know for a fact 15, 20 years ago, that would have been way less viable. It would have been all letters, emails. We'd probably do the Griffin and Sabine thing and have to mail each other stuff. Yes. Griffin and Sabine, haven't heard about that one in a while.
It would be less technologically enabled, but far more wistfully romantic. No.
Oh, Griffin and Sabine now, geez, it'd be FaceTiming each other and sending each other. Well, I don't know, Messiah. When I used to do that, we would, I would make zip files and send her mix. I would make her mixtapes. I would just send them to her via media file. So there you go.
Right. There's always a solution. Every era provides its own solution.
Oh, technology
to these problems.
It's great. I Skype with my mom, once every couple of weeks. It's great. So.
But Skyping with one's girlfriend and realizing you can live in a foreign culture, two very different things there. So what was the road to that?
The road to that was just me visiting, and because she had to go back, and so she had responsibilities to take care of, responsibilities to the family business.
Things we don't know about in North America, definitely.
Well,
I mean, I don't.
There are certain responsibilities that was quite the eye-opener. For instance, there's a lot more responsibility to the family, to the ancestors. That's a legitimate reality. Somebody has to be responsible to take care of the family shrine in the house where grandma's ashes are,
Right, that shrine's not going to take care of itself.
Yeah, exactly. We have to welcome the ancestors back during Oban every August, and somebody has to come and visit the family grave.
Right. Yeah.
And clean that and make visits with the ancestors and report what's going on, and somebody has to do that. And that's one of the reasons why there's this insistence on, having kids and continuing the family line, right, and respecting your ancestors. So even something like that sort of responsibility is something in North America I think a lot of us can't wrap your head around.
Yeah, it's really, you can understand it intellectually, but we grew up in North America compared to Japan. It's like we were almost emancipated minors already. Like that we were almost vaguely tethered to our families to begin with compared to Japan, which gets the claws into you.
Most people, maybe there's a little bit of legacy stuff in terms of, that conflict is global. It's well, son, we need you, back in Manitoba. It's well, son, we need somebody to keep at it with the family farm. And it's I'm going to move to the big city and be an artist. I just want to dance, Dad. That happens here too.
Right.
I'm sure there's, the 4 generations of a law firm or a retailer. There's going to be that back home, but here it's much stronger.
It's like I go back to memories of watching, say, Kurosawa films with my friends as kids, and you see these characters, or even say Ozu films a little later on. You see characters struggling with, should I do what I want to, or should I do what my family wants me to? And at age 13, I would always say just do what you want to do. Why is this guy whining? Just do what you want to do. But that I guess sheds light on this very understanding gap.
Oh, absolutely. It's a funny thing because whenever people talk about Japan, they always say, it's the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. I hear that one get bandied about a lot. And of course, from individualistic North American, we've been raised and trained to think that that's a bad thing. And I think I've really started living in East Vancouver and working on Commercial Drive for a long time really made me start. Maybe it's a bit of growing out of wanting to have purple dreadlocks or express myself or whatever.
Yes, indeed.
Kind of realizing that emphasis on individualism, really calling that into question after visiting Japan a few times. Ideas of responsibility to people other than yourself and other to your soul's calling or blah blah blah. I don't know. It's it's still, all of that is still undergoing an audit, so I can't really give any answer. Living in Japan, period, it's this constant process of auditing a lot of things that I kind of know or believe or things that I'm used to, even things like individualism and I want to do this, but I have to do this. Well, maybe it might actually be better for you to not do what you want all the time. I think that's one of the reasons why North Americans in particular, they love their Zen. They love their Buddhism. I mean, and I mean that's part of what attracted me to Japan too. Was went through that brief period of ooh, Zen, what's this? And reading Shambhala-san and but North American Buddhists, I think a lot of it is because they're boomers or children of boomers with parents who were kind of parents who were trying to be their best friends rather than parents. And my parents were like that too. You can be whatever you want. It'll work out fine, and kind of I think there's Westerners who are almost fetishize the discipline of, for instance, Zen monastic life and a Buddhist practice.
Right. If only I could sit all day.
Yeah, it's no fun. It's not. I can guarantee you that if you ask any Zen Buddhist here, it's said, it's sitting and it's cold and it's a lot of work.
Right. It starts at 3 a.m. and you wash out your bowl with your finger. You wouldn't like it, Americans. You wouldn't like it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I think probably there's a certain disconnection that we have in our cushy lives in North America of what is the meaning of Zen? Oh, chop wood, carry water. Oh, that sounds so nice. And it's it's probably nice to do for a weekend retreat that cost you $1,500.
Right.
Absolutely. But,
They just want to not have to use Excel for a while.
Yeah. Very true. Yeah. I don't know. I'm kind of cynical about a lot of things, so I'm holding back because there's a microphone in my face.
Indeed. Listeners, if they've heard my most recent interview with Pico Iyer a few days ago, also recorded here in Nara, they will have heard me air my feelings, and I guess Pico did his as well, that Japan it's an excellent place to be in, especially if you're not Japanese. I feel like I'm freeloading on the amenities of Japan, and I'm out of the social contract that makes those amenities possible. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely it. I remember that interview you did with Mr. Iyer really helped I was having a hard time kind of framing a lot of things when I first came here, because culture shock's an interesting thing. My first visits to Japan, I got culture shock when I came back to Vancouver. We should talk about that
Reverse
later.
Culture shock.
Oh, absolutely.
Mental note.
Yeah. But the way Pico Iyer put it is, he said, when you're a foreigner living in Japan, you do not have those responsibilities. You are not bound to a lot of these social pressures. And if you want to live in Japan, and if you, let's say your thing is kendo and tea ceremony, Japan, you can create your own Japan that will accommodate that. If you want to move here and be a Buddhist monk and actually make that jump, you can do that. I know that there's a foreigner Buddhist monk here in Japan who does this thing. If you want to be a full-on otaku and only care about anime, well, Akihabara's there. Good luck, man. You can do it.
Have at it. Godspeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's one of the things about the privilege about being a foreigner in Japan, is that if you want to kind of take in all of the aspects of the culture without a lot of the social pressure, it's a great place to be. I think some of the worst you'll experience is that if you maybe move out of English teaching and work in the Japanese office and in the Japanese workplace, where it's very hierarchical, very strict. And I think that ties in as well with when we were talking about visual culture in Japan, is that there's this austerity and strictness and sternness to everything. But that's also what makes everything go.
Indeed.
And North America isn't like that. North America is made up of people who wanted to get the hell away from that.
Right, exactly.
We're
all escapees there.
Yeah, and want to build things, it's the frontier, and build things in your own image. And that's one of the things about, say, Vancouver and East Vancouver that just started to drive me nuts after a while, is when you've already been through I'm going to move out to the West Coast and do a lot of mushrooms and learn how to drum and, and dye my hair purple, and, I'm a culture jammer, right, anarchist, whatever. Hey man, I'm expressing myself. What do you do when you get past that?
Right, yes. What then?
What then? And I found that my what then, once I finished art school, was living in Japan for some reason. I think everything dovetailed beautifully because I had already met this wonderful lady, and moving here was going to be in the cards anyway. And it was 3 visits that really sealed the deal. And I have a feeling if I went to a city other than Nara, it probably would have been very difficult. Nara is an amazing little city.
Well, what has it afforded you in terms of, I don't know if ease is the word you're looking for, but maybe it accommodates your own personality? Or
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, the foreigners in Japan, it's kind of like with English teachers. English teachers, they're a bunch of weird oddball personalities with English teachers. Like when I never said when I grow up I'm going to work in an eikaiwa. It wasn't that. It was a matter of just like anybody else. You go to art school and then after go, well, I'm probably not going to be able to pay the bills with this. So when I wanted to make the move here, I remember one of my teachers, when I was getting my TESOL certification, was saying, yeah, see, you're going to meet a lot of weirdos because with English teaching, there's just some personalities where they're just not going to fit in anywhere else.
Oh, geez, yeah, talk about escapees. There's the real. We in North America are descendants of escapees, and if we need to escape that, it's back to another ancient country where we're so different, our oddballness gets bleached out to some extent.
To a certain extent. I think also it's a matter of what resonates with the individual. I mean, the same way that, we all know people that live in Berlin or Paris, and whatever it is that floats their boat culturally, that just works for them. Whatever makes them resonate, even on a cellular level. Something about Paris, for instance, makes people I know just go, that's it.
Right.
That's why I live there. I was a prairie boy and I moved to the West Coast, and being out around the mountains, I hate Vancouver, but I love the West Coast. Being around like the nature and the mountains just resonated. So I think people come to Japan for their own reasons. It's just some of the other foreigners I encounter. I haven't made friends with a lot, and I haven't encountered a lot because I don't live in a big city. But yeah, there's some interesting personalities here. There's somewhere on the web, there's a great post called The 10 Types of Gaijin.
Oh, yes.
And I always hate it when people try to pigeonhole stuff like that. But as satire goes, they nail it.
What are some of the types that really resonated? Oh yeah, that's one.
Well, let's see. Well, for sure, there's the if I don't know if you know the term weeaboo.
Yeah, I do, but maybe the listeners don't.
The weeaboo. Let's see. The weeaboo. I think it originated from a cartoon, but then it kind of took on its own life as a meme, via 4chan and all of that. But weeaboos are like, those are like the white otaku, the ones that really
want to be Japanese.
the wapping, like there's wiggers. I don't know if using that term is politically incorrect or not. But
I think we're on solid ground.
Yeah, but when you see a white guy, wearing like the Chicago Bulls jersey and the flat brim hat, and talking in Ebonics, that's exactly the same thing as you got like the anime nerd who dresses all kawaii and like uses, They call themselves, like their screen name is like Ritsuko-chan, and all of that. Just annoying as hell, especially if you're not an anime fan. So you have like the weeaboos, and I'm sure they're here. I've seen a couple, and that's cool. Some people dig anime, right on. That's not my thing.
Difference between liking anime and wanting to convert yourself into, frustratingly, trying to convert yourself into somebody who will be accepted as an honorary Japanese here. That's never going to happen.
Muri nandai. Muri nandai. It'll never happen. That is, muri. That's just an unreasonable request. I mean, that's something else we could talk about, but I'm adding that into what reverse culture shock and becoming Japanese. We have to talk about that. But yeah, weeaboos, for instance, I find it interesting because I think that is now a viable identity to try on in high school now. It wasn't around when I was young. Right. I think there's that generation gap too. I didn't grow up on Naruto and Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon. I'm too old for that. My entry point was like Akira and Ghost in the Shell.
Right, yes. And that stuff, the more annoying stuff was just coming in when I was in high school. And that stopped me from studying Japanese. I was going to. I started studying it by myself, and then I was like, wait, look at those kids. Yeah, I can't risk being seen as one of them. Like, no matter how much I try, it can't happen. I'll die a virgin.
That's part of the stereotype, but pretty much true. Yeah, and the thing is, every culture has its geeks and their nerds, and if they're into that, right on, more power to you. But so, for instance, the types of gaijin here, you've got the weeaboos, you've got the white samurais, which is cool. Like I know one girl I know from Vancouver. She goes to Japan once every couple of years because she's really heavy into karate, and that's like a serious discipline for her. So you got like the white guys who like want to get into swordplay and stuff and martial arts, and that's cool. You've got you got the travelers. I work with one guy like that, where like lived in Vancouver for a bit, went to Thailand, went to here, went to there, went to there.
Does he call himself nomadic?
I don't think he does, but he definitely is, And at English schools, like you always have that one guy. He's just traveling. He won't be around. No point in signing a contract.
Right, Rolling Stone.
Yeah, he's a Rolling Stone. You've got the lifers, who. I don't know. I mean, one of the stereotypes about people who come here, you have a lot of people who come on the jet program, like it so much for whatever reason. Usually they meet a lady or a guy. And then they come back. But there's also a lot of the stereotype about like the English teacher is they just screwed it up so badly back home that they came here.
Oh, they're running.
They're running.
This is like Northwest Territories people. Like they had to go up, or Alaska people, we would say in the States. Like they had no place else to go.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it's kind of like that whole Dutch Harbor thing. It's Dutch Harbor in the Aleutian Islands. A great documentary, but they say it's the last place to go. But
once you're persona non grata there, it's over.
Absolutely. Less so in criminal terms, because they're pretty thorough with record checks here.
Right.
I had a friend who taught in Korea, though, who said he worked in some schools where. It's like, it's like, oh yeah, there's this one guy, he had priors in Ontario, he's a wanted man there, and, right. And I'm sure there's a lot of fly-by-night English schools where there are some creeps. Yeah. There are some creeps out there, but yeah, I think there's a lot of kind of second act people here, or, I mean, for me, the name... The name of like a solo show I did at the small gallery in Vancouver was I Just Happened to Be There.
Yes.
And that informed my take on like photography, on kind of seeing the world as that flaneur sort of just whatever presents itself. And the way things fell into place is that I met somebody and then I visited here, and luckily I really, really liked it.
Right.
There was some vague passing interest in some aspects of Japanese culture, but, whenever I finally write the autobiography or the book about Japan, because every gaijin wants to write a book about Japan.
Some of them are good, others are... What does it take? Have you read these books? I mean, is it... I like to read them, and I try to think about what separates the interesting ones from just the, like... Here we go.
I don't know. I mean, I kind of don't read them anymore because I live here the same way that, like, all of the J-vloggers, the Japanese video blog community on YouTube, I don't really watch them anymore now that I'm here.
Right.
Because they're kind of...
Why would you?
They're serving mostly the people that want to come. They're the ones blogging about, like, taking their, like, cameras with them and on day trips or talking about life in Japan. And they're there to kind of... A lot of them are there to service the people that want to come here, or for the other expats. And there are some really good people worth watching. Guys like Hiko Simon, Victor Gimme a Flake Man, a guy in Osaka named Unrested. And they have great insight because they're lifers. They've, like a lot of them, they've been here for years. So
their perspective is not, hey, novelty, Japan, weird.
OMG, Japan, kawaii, smiley face.
It's a theme that's come up in these conversations, is that Japan isn't weird. It's pitched as weird. As kids, it was pitched to us in America and in Canada as hey, look at this weird land where nothing, where hamburgers eat people, and but it's not weird.
Sure, yeah, I mean that's. I mean, yeah, you grow up on that. Like you grow up on like wacky Japan, and it's like, my God, the golf driving ranges are 3 stories, and they have and they have like multi-tiered parking garages, and the vending machines talk to you, and It's mind-blowing the first time you experience it. You go to Dotonbori in Osaka, which is Ridley Scott, pretty much modeled Blade Runner, that futuristic LA on Dotonbori and Shinsaibashi. It is absolutely dazzling. And a lot of viral videos you see on YouTube of Japanese game shows and comedy, sites that sell goods like J-List, they kind of venture a little bit into the hentai territory.
Yeah, more and more as time goes on.
Weird. I mean, I have never seen a panty vending machine.
Yes, that's come up in one of these interviews before. They're not real, I guess, or that's like an overblown, like one machine got repurposed to sell those, and then that got made into, they're everywhere in Japan.
I don't doubt they exist, but I'm more blown away by the fact that there are beer vending machines here that don't get robbed and then drained of money and then stripped for all of their saleable metal goods by sunup, because that's what would happen in Vancouver.
Right, and
you can buy cigarettes and beer on the street. And they don't get trashed.
We were talking about this as we were enjoying drinks from one of the vending machines right near us. They're everywhere. I was buying a warm lemonade. It looks like I have a green tea of some kind. Yeah. And we were saying, every Westerner says, because I talked to every one of them about it, back home, those things would be just smashed. They'd be trashed. And we're here enjoying them. We're Westerners, but I don't feel the impulse to strip that of saleable metal. I take it neither do you.
Well, neither of us are criminals, for starters. And,
that's true.
Or in Vancouver, it's the unfortunate reality is, there's a lot of desperation and drug addiction in Vancouver, and that fuels a lot of the property crime and also fuels the drug trade, and that kind of makes... I promise not to, rag on Vancouver too much, so I'll be nice. But that's kind of what makes living in Vancouver a very intense place to be. Is there's this constant undercurrent of kind of pain and desperation and sadness because of the addiction there, because that fuels so much crime. But you take that coupled with the people with money, because it takes money to live there, and the kind of selfish individualism there. Because Vancouver is, go west, young man. That's the place where people go to figure out their shit.
Right.
And, to start wearing Lululemon or become white Buddhists or learn how to drum or work in the movie industry. So there's this weird mishmash of lifestyle politics and identity. Identity is such a heavy, huge currency in Japan. Coupled with, crime, drug addiction, and all of that, and then mixed in there as well is the diversity, which is great. It's Vancouver is such. We could do a whole podcast about Vancouver.
Right.
It's a marvelous place to live, but also very frustrating. But in terms of ripping off vending machines, anyway, we'll get back to that. We wouldn't want to do that because we don't have. Our life isn't kind of structured in a way that would lead us to do that.
Right.
And I don't really have any itch to go spray paint my name on a wall or...
We don't need to literally make our mark.
No. And I think part of Japan too is I'm sure you've noticed how clean it is.
Yes.
You come back to... You will notice every single cigarette butt and gum squished into the pavement.
I do not live in a clean neighborhood. That's going to be bad.
Oh, man, and we can talk about reverse culture shock there, because the first time I went to Japan, what I was really amazed by, and a good friend of mine who's Japanese but lives in Vancouver said, she was right in saying I had a little bit of the rose-colored glasses, because you know what, there are rude people in Japan, there are selfish people in Japan, there are assholes in Japan, there are douchebags, there are. I have the benefit right now of having the language barrier, so I don't have to listen to inane conversations on the train platform. But the reverse culture shock for me was coming back to Vancouver and having people talking on their phone on the bus, people not looking where they're going on the street, people pissing on the seat in public toilets, all of that stuff. And coming back from if you go to a major intersection in Osaka where it's one of those three-side or four-side intersections where everyone crosses at the same time, most of the time no one bumps into each other, no one does that weird dance to dodge each other, and that's bicycles in the mix. Right. Everyone has this kind of force field around them, because everyone, I think part of it is because everyone lives so close together. Everyone is much more aware of their own space in Japan, whereas the flip side of that in North America is you own that 2 meters around you. You're in my way, motherfucker. Get out. Is this for radio? I'm sorry.
No, it's that you can say whatever you want. We're doing it.
All right, you're in my way. Yeah. It's not the other way around. And I found stuff like that in North America really started to grate on me after being in Japan.
It's this Yeah, it's very easy, I would imagine, and I'm sure I'll do it, to go back to the States and say, oh, look at how dirty everything is. Look at how there's no vending machines. Look at how there's pee on the seats. Look at how there's no conveniences anywhere. Look at how the only kind of infrastructure there is highways. Like it's
the trains here actually run on time.
Right.
Super legitimacy once again that strictness and that sternness is, unless somebody got fed up because of all of that repression and sternness and strictness and jumped in front of the train to delay it, when the train comes at 12:01, it comes at 12:01 and not a second too soon and not a second too late.
Right. They are on a schedule. It's not like, well, they'll be here every 10 minutes just about, and if they don't, deal with it. That's the way it is, as I find in the States.
Yeah, but that pressure also is what makes people jump in front of the train and cause the delays. So the suicide rate here is quite something.
And that hints at, the dark side of Japan, I guess we could broadly say. I mean, the dark side of North America is so obvious because it's in your face every day. The first thing you see is the dark side. But there's also the sense in which there's ambition in North America, and it often manifests itself as a gnawing resentment. People who are the train drivers or who are the cashiers who just we expect them to seethe with resentment that they're not higher up on whatever ladder they're trying to climb.
Yeah.
But there's also
it's an aspirational culture.
It's aspirational in a negative way, but on the plus side, it's aspirational.
At least
people are ambitious, and I've had few conversations with Japanese people because my Japanese is not up to it. But I don't get the ambient sense of ambition in Japan as dissatisfaction, but nor do I feel the charge of ambition in the air. I don't know if that makes any sense at all.
Well, yes and no. I think like that kind of aspirational culture in North America is kind of it's a double-edged sword because it's good. It kind of keeps people going, but at the same time, there's a lot of there's healthy competition and unhealthy competition, and part of North America I find is that whole. Like I'm going to be 40 soon, and like I already had the midlife crisis when I was 30 because the way I was raised was you can be anything you want to be.
Yeah.
You just got
I can be anything.
God damn it, I'm not 30 and I'm not a rock star yet, or I'm not the president, and it's
I haven't cured cancer.
I haven't cured cancer. It's to a certain extent, it gets cited way too often, but Tyler Durden's speech in Fight Club about how we're all raised to believe that we're going to be the president or a rock star or a millionaire, but there's this ethic all the way through where everyone's just like, what, you're not a millionaire yet, loser, but
they're not millionaires themselves saying it. These aren't millionaires looking down on you.
But I'm on my way, man. I'm on my, I'm going to be one day, and I got tired of that. I mean, it's the same thing. You go to art school, and you kind of get involved with the art scene and stuff like that, and it's like. It's like you're seeing your peers get successful, and that's great because they're good people who earned it. But then you see other people where it's like, there's this constant pressure of just like, man, why haven't I had a solo show yet? Why am I not being represented? God. You know how it is. It's like any clique or any scene. You go in Vancouver, there's all that playa hating and kind of like backbiting and quiet resentment, but at the same time community and support, and that exists everywhere. It's not just Vancouver, not just the art scene, but I found I really saw that kind of at its ugliest at art school.
Right.
But I was also 10 years older than everybody there, so maybe I had a different take on it.
Well, but you're a young-looking man.
Thank you.
So I can't imagine. I would imagine you passed.
I could get away with it, I guess, But yeah, there isn't. But I know, in terms of that aspiration, that go for it, that charge in the air. I think that aspirational go for it charge in the air back in North America, especially with the way the economy is, especially American culture. If you look at TV. And I hate to say
I don't have one.
I hate to say this because I'm a Canadian saying this about America, and that's
an American, no less.
Yes,
but then again, I don't have a TV, and I haven't seen these, so you're going to be telling me about it.
But this kind of rah just seems kind of desperate and kind of pathetic.
I see what you mean. I mean, look, neither of us are on really competitive tracks, are we? We've moved ourselves out of those.
Yeah, and I mean, if it manifests itself in like what, reality TV, that's it. I'm a star. That's as good as it gets. Yeah.
It's no kind of stardom I would desire.
Yeah, no, thank you. Or you're, being successful means, you work for one of the 1% banks that basically fucks everybody else over.
There's that too. There's that whole thing.
That whole Gordon Gekko sort of, I mean, if that's what success is. And I feel like I'm painting with way too big of a brush, so I don't know.
Well, we'll take it down to a finer grain and say, you personally, it's creating art, writing, you've gotten yourself out of that maybe toxic environment where people are always subtly or not so subtly competing against one another for the milestones. But being here in Japan, I would imagine, gives you some, I won't say fount of inspiration, that's a little too grand, but it puts you into a different setting. It gives you that, and then it also gets you away from direct resentment, I suppose you might say, that circle of resentment that can go on.
Well, yeah, once you kind of leave the game, or like the rat race, for sure. I mean, part of it too was, I think part of it was just kind of looking at my visual work and just going, I'm just not that good. I'll stick with the writing. It's one of those things. You're encouraged. That's a big thing. You're constantly encouraged to be like the Renaissance man is, or it's in North America. I find it was or in the West, it's like the Renaissance man is respected, but that line between being multi-talented and being a dilettante.
Yes, it's a tough line to feel out.
And the proof was, the proof will come out in the pudding, and I found that really writing about art is the thing that people kept wanting to give me money for and kept asking me to do.
Right.
So I figure, well, I'll go with that. Apparently I do it well.
And being here in Japan, continuing to write here, where have you found your interests going as far as art to think about, art to write about, art to focus upon and draw from?
It's going more towards music right now, because the thing is, that's the one downside is, the upside is living in Vancouver and trying to stay on top of everything culturally was exhausting. I mean, just when all of your friends are musicians and artists, there's always openings, always gigs, always shows, always things to go to. And by my last 2 years in Vancouver, I was just so tired and just working a shitty job and wanting to jump in front of the train every day and, wanting to be in Japan and just working, just really going through like a 2 steps forward, 1 step back sort of cycle. That I couldn't even go to anything and didn't have the energy to do so. So now that I've kind of removed myself from that, I found that this is going to be really, I guess this is like some of Vancouver's kind of hippie bad influence, but this year I've, written one live review for The Liminal, and that was James Blackshaw's show in Osaka last week, and I wrote a review of a Daido Moriyama retrospective in Osaka this year, and that's about it. It's been quiet. I've done some sound work, and I've just needed to take a year off to get away from everything, and I just kind of wanted to just get away from everything and just go be a person for a little bit. Right.
But I guess you have the deadline of being the deadline of not being just a person approaching. Then you have to you're going to put yourself into another mode soon. Is that it?
I think so. Yeah. It's like I just wanted to take a break from just. I mean, I'm still making work. It's just that it's just a different kind of work. It's pointing towards something. I don't know. But as far as writing is concerned, it's going more towards in a music direction. The visual art is taking a backseat to working more with sound, doing field recording.
Of which Japan is a rich place to do that. You've whipped out your phone a few times to capture the sounds of little kids asking us questions in English, for example.
Yes, I know. We were being interviewed by a bunch of little kids there on a school trip, so they're asking foreigners about what they like about Nara. It was very cute. But yeah, so I mean, I've had some works, show on the framework of field radio show and broadcast. Etc. I'm not sure what direction the work will take. It's kind of my good friend of mine, Heidi, very talented artist back in Vancouver, and another one, Jeff O'Brien, great photographer in Vancouver. They both said the same thing, and it always stuck with me, which is whenever I get frustrated and it's like, God damn it, I quit. Screw this art shit, I'm done. And he's like, and I remember Heidi, just great in her inimitable style, was like, Whatever, Olson. You're like me. You think about it 24 hours a day. My friend Jeff O'Brien said the same thing. You're never going to quit. You're just going to...
Don't even front. Well, hey, why bother?
Yeah.
You're in it. You're in it.
Work. It's just a matter of what you're going to do with it. And I'm just enjoying kind of being away from that sense of obligation. Like I get the invites in my Facebook feed, and there are some interesting things happening, but I don't really miss it that much. I'm just I just wanted to take a year off, or maybe 2, maybe 5 it'll turn into, and just kind of focus more on form.
Right. And having lived here over a year, I wonder, is it whether for whatever you're creating or whatever you happen to be doing, whatever you happen to be writing, is there a sense in which you want to keep or recapture some sense of that Chris Marker's son Soleil, delirious, displaced traveler within you?
To a large extent. I mean, I think part of it is just wanting to take the aspiration and turn it down a bit, which is funny because I've got there are projects, like I just had 2 old works published in the last Vispo, which is a visual poetry anthology. I'm doing a collaboration with the File Arts with a graphic designer in Utrecht. So the visual work is still happening, but as far as that dreaminess and taking a break, because I'm just kind of just busy, just soaking it all in and just enjoying it. Turning the aspirational knob down a little bit and just doing things for the sake of doing things rather than, how is this going to affect my practice? Is this good for my CV?
What's going to happen to my career?
Yeah, it's just kind of like letting go of that and just going, I'm just going to do stuff. And if anyone happens to pay attention, hey, great.
It is a little difficult to be in a setting like this here in Nara and think too hard about one's career, is it not?
Yeah, that's just it. You can't. It's hard to kind of think about the hustle when there's just looking around me. There's a couple of deer munching on stuff. The other one's having a nap. We're in the woods, and yeah, it's just this. I like it here a lot. I really, really do. It's a good place to decompress. I like my life here with Masayo and the life that we have right now, and the one that we're building. I like it a lot more than my life I had in Vancouver. It comes with a lot of the stresses. I mean, being a foreigner in Japan and the language barrier and culture shock. They say it works in a W. I think it works more like a sawtooth.
Oh, yes.
Sawtooth wave, in that it's these abrupt stretches where you coast and you're fine, and then you'll have like a 2-week period where you're just really oversensitive about stuff. The thing, I know the Sans Soleil sense of delirium can also, there's a flip side to it where it's like, I love it. This is great. I can't read the signs. I can't, the conversations going on around me, I don't understand them. There's something really nice about that. Where, it's like you can kind of by being a little isolated, it's actually really good for you. You can, if you like being alone, and I do, ask all of my old friends, they know I'm prone to just being a hermit and disappearing for 3 weeks. This is a really good place to be alone. If you really need to be around people, Japan might be very hard for you. I haven't really made any gaijin friends yet. I'm in no rush, because I'm married. I've got I've got my adopted family and the 2 dogs. Working as an English teacher, you are talking to people all day.
Yes.
You're peopled out by the end of it. So I just really like my life here a lot more. It's a lot quieter. The quiet life is nicer, but yeah, the culture shock is funny because there are days when you freak out because you can't read the kanji, and then there's other days where even the most simplest transaction at a store can be a great learning experience, or it can be just the most frustrating thing ever, and I'm never going to understand the language. Why do I even bother?
And you get certain days where you can read the kanji. Hey.
Absolutely. I mean, I always liken it to... You get stared, especially if you're you're both, you're blonde-haired and blue-eyed too. So it's like, if you're blonde-haired and blue-eyed, you get looked at a lot. If you're a foreigner, it's just a thing. You get stared at. And when people are looking at you on the train, you mostly you don't notice it. But if you're on the low end of the valley and feeling shitty, yeah, you can go through these stretches like, what the hell are you looking at?
I'm not your freak show.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. We'll just see. I'm just going to keep riding those waves of culture shock and see how it goes. It was just like a new start, building a new life with somebody who, we had a life together in Vancouver, and now it's here. And that's great. And the culture shock angle is not as bad as I had anticipated. It's just, you just know that it'll just come and go in waves. I think it's because I've, even things like moving to Vancouver from my hometown a couple times, like that prepared me well enough to know that you'll have those moments of homesickness, like listening to CBC radio and like Stuart McLean's Vinyl podcast. It's like I tear up and get homesick like nobody's business. Oh, absolutely. Around Thanksgiving and Christmas, it's rough. But, I got Skype. I can see my mom. My mom came to visit in June, so no problem. And yeah, as far as the whole being a foreigner in Japan thing, it's like, yeah, it is what it is. You like the attention some days, and other days you don't. So
I've been sitting here amid the hustle of the deer and the school children and the giant Buddha in Nara, Japan, with Christopher Olson, writer, artist, critic, teacher, and gaijin in Japan, but that's not the salient element at all.
Well, like I said, when I write my autobiography, it's going to be called The Accidental Japanophile.
Accidental Japanophile. Watch for that somewhere in the next 40 years, listeners.
Probably 40 years, yeah.
Christopher, thanks so much.
Thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure.
This has been Notebook on Cities and Culture. I've been Colin Marshall. You can keep up with the cultural creators, internationalists, and observers of the urban scene on the show at colinmarshall.org. Thanks. And special thanks to everybody who backed Season 3 on Kickstarter, including Paige Calvert, Jonathan Crow, Douglas Dollars, Paul Doyle, John French, Eric Graham, Will Graham, Umberto Grant, Kimberly Hahn, Carl Haley, Stefan Halperin, Matt Howie, Andrew Hovanek, Mark Hines, Andy Cooney, Mark Larson, Matthew Lickey, Mr. Munvirzi, Rob Motz, Lindsay Muniak, Daniel Murphy, Aidan Noman, Patrick O'Flaherty, Danny Olson, Michael O'Regan, Blake Riley, Rob Schultz, Cam Smith, Small Demons, Todd Shimoda, Kevin Smokler, Thomas Unterberger, Matt Warren, and Wayne Wright.